So very good morning, dear students. Today, what we will be doing is we'll be doing the transport in plants, a summary of it, the entire chapter that we have discussed. So tomorrow we'll be commencing with mineral nutrition. Okay, so transport in plants will be doing the complete summary of it for today. So I've already told you the transportation in plants involve transport of water, transport of food, transport of minerals, transport of uh, the mineral solutions. So all these are taking place in plants, and that is possible because of the vascular tissue, xylem and phloem. So xylem transports the uh, minerals and water. So we call it as sap, ascent of sap, or uptake of water, or transport of water. Whereas, and it is unidirectional. So the transportation in xylem, it is unidirectional from root to the various parts of the plant. So it is against the gravitational force and unidirectional. Whereas the transportation brought about by phloem, it is going to be multidirectional. So the background slide, if you look into, it is a section of leaf. You can see the palisade chlorenchyma, spongy chlorenchyma, lower epidermis with the stomata. So the food is taken up from the mesophyll, that is the chlorenchyma cells. It is vein loading, we call it as. So the food is loaded with the help of these companion cells into the phloem, and that food is going to be conveyed to the sink region where the food is required or utilized. The region where the food is synthesized, we call it as the source region. So, and the flow of food or organic solutes or organic compounds. So we call it as translocation of organic solutes, and it is multi-directional, and it is through the sieve tube. So the sieve tube forms a continuous column because of the sieve plates that they have, and this flow of food, so we call it as the transport of food from the source to the sink region. It would be the multi-directional. So this is what we have to remember about before we proceed into the topic of transportation in plants. And you know that in animals or human beings, the transportation of nutrients, respiratory gases, and everything is brought about by the fluid vascular tissue, that is blood, the river of life. Blood does all that job. Whereas in plants, the vascular tissues are xylem and phloem, which has to transport. Xylem transports the water and minerals, whereas the phloem transports the organic solutes. So the food will be in the form of sucrose. Okay, even though during photosynthesis they are synthesized as glucose, when they are being transported, it is in the form of sucrose. Okay, so the transportation in plants, plants do not have any interstitial fluid like lymph or blood, they do not have, and circulatory system also they do not possess. See, in case of animals, for the circulation of the blood and the circulation of the nutrients and the respiratory gases, heart is very important. So heart pumps the blood and it circulates the blood. So we don't have any such circulatory system in case of plants, so they are absent. So plants, neither do they have interstitial fluid nor do they have circulatory system. So you have to remember about that. So but plants, they require various substances just like any other living organisms. They require various substances like water, minerals, organic nutrients, growth regulators. They are all required by plants, which have to be transported over long distances. If it is in case of a herb and shrub, it is very short distance. But in case of a very huge tall tree, some of them I told you that they are nearly 110-meter tall tree, like Sequoia dendron gigantea. So still the tip of the tree, the food has to be the water has to be supplied to, and for that they require various mechanisms. So we'll be discussing that in the uptake of water. So now the plants require various substances like water, minerals, organic nutrients, growth regulators to be transported over long distances. So based on the direction of transport, there are two types of transport. So unidirectional transport and multidirectional transport. So if the transport of water and minerals in xylem from root to stems, leaves, etc. takes place, it is unidirectional. So the unidirectional transport, we have the example of transport of water and minerals from the root to the stems, leaves, etc. It is unidirectional and it is against the gravitational force. So the multidirectional transport is the food that is synthesized by the leaves. Leaves are the kitchen of the plant. So they undergo photosynthesis, and the food that is synthesized, that is the transport of photosynthetates, takes place, or organic compounds, then transport of mineral nutrients, they are taking place through the phloem, and it is multi-directional transport. With the gravitational force, against the gravitational force, they'll be supplying the food to the sink region. Okay, sometimes the plant hormones and other chemical stimuli are also transported in a polarized or unidirectional manner from where they are synthesized to the other parts of the plant. So plant hormones, you know that the definition is they are chemical messengers which are secreted in minute quantities, and it has its effect at the target region. So it might not have any effect at the region where it is secreted, but it has its effect at the target region. Okay, so here the plant hormones, so they don't have any blood for transportation. So wherever they are secreted, they are taken to the target organs by unidirectional manner from where they are synthesized to other parts. So the plant hormones and other chemical stimuli are transported in a polarized or unidirectional manner from where they are synthesized to their target organs. So you just remember the transport of plant hormones or phytohormones. Then we discussed about the means of transport. Okay, so whenever they ask this question in biology, please don't write land transport, roadways, airways. Please do not write that. So the means of transport are, so diffusion, facilitated diffusion. Then we have this active transport. So here you can notice that diffusion is movement of solute, solvent, or gas molecules from a higher concentrated region to a region of lower concentrated region. So we call this as diffusion. So I had given you some examples of a perfume bottle being kept open in a room. So the aroma or the fragrance of that perfume spreads throughout the room. Okay, they are volatile solutions, isn't it? Perfumes are all volatile. So if you expose them, the smell would spread. So similarly, the fragrance would spread. Similarly, facilitated diffusion. Here also there is movement of uh, the solute, liquid, or gaseous molecules from a here the movement of solutes or takes place from a higher concentrated region to lower concentrated region through a protein channel or a transport protein. So they are going to selectively allow the particles to enter inside from the through the concentration gradient. Here there is a protein channel involved in the movement of the particles. So we call this as facilitated diffusion. The facilitator is here the transport channel, or the protein channel is the facilitator. And in both diffusion and facilitated diffusion, there is no expenditure of energy. So they are passive type of transport. So there is no expenditure of ATP. So diffusion and facilitated diffusion, they are passive transport system. In case of active transport, what you notice is, so it is against the concentration gradient. So the movement is from lower concentrated region to higher concentrated region. So this is against the concentration gradient. And when it is against the concentration gradient, there is expenditure of energy. So ATP is utilized to transport these particles across the plasma membrane. And again, even in active transport, there is this protein channel which is involved in transporting these molecules against their concentration gradient with the expenditure of energy from lower concentrated region to higher concentrated region. So we call this as active transport. See, these are the basic differences between diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and active transport. So active transport can also be called as uphill transport because it is against the concentration gradient. You can also call it as uphill transport. So let us go into the details of it. So the diffusion, it is a slow movement. It's a very slow movement, and I've already told you why diffusion cannot be utilized for transport of the uptake of water. It's a very slow process. It is a slow movement of gases, liquids, or solutes from a higher concentrated region to a lower concentrated region without the energy expenditure. This is the definition of diffusion. The slow movement of gases from a gases, liquids, or solutes from higher concentrated region to lower concentrated region without the expenditure of energy across the plasma membrane. We call it as diffusion. So it may be from one part of the cell to other, or from cell to cell, or over short distances. Okay, so this can be, it is a physical process. It is not that diffusion takes place only in uh, the living components. It can even take place in non-living components, diffusion. So diffusion, so it may be from one part of the cell to the other, or from cell to cell also this diffusion can take place, or over short distances the diffusion can take place. I told you about how diffusion takes place between our alveoli and the we have the capillary. So there is a diffusion between our alveoli and the capillary. So we call that as it is by diffusion process from a region of higher concentration. So oxygen will be more in the freshly entered air in the alveoli. So the transport of carbon dioxide from the higher concentration to the capillary will be having lower concentration of oxygen. So there is exchange of oxygen here. Oxygen enters in, and the capillary will be having more amount of carbon dioxide than the atmospheric air. So there is exit of carbon dioxide. So this exchange of respiratory gases are taking place between the alveoli and capillary through this diffusion process. So let us understand about this diffusion process. Even though we have a very unique respiratory system, ultimately the exchange of respiratory gases, it is through this diffusion process. And diffusion is not dependent on a living system. It can also take place in a non-living component. So you should be very much aware about it. So diffusion is the only means for gaseous movement in a plant body. So diffusion is the only process for the gaseous movement in a plant body. So let us understand about this diffusion process of it. Then factors affecting diffusion rate. So what are the factors which can affect the rate of diffusion? Concentration gradient. If they are having more the concentration gradient, more the rate of diffusion. So lesser the concentration gradient, lesser the rate of diffusion. So concentration gradient is one of the factor which affects diffusion rate. So the permeability of the membrane, the plasma membrane, if it is more permeable, the diffusion is much more faster. If it is lesser permeable, the diffusion rate is lower. Okay, permeability of the membrane for the substances which are entering in or exiting out, that is also playing an important role. So the permeability of the membrane is also important. So temperature and pressure also plays an important role in influencing the rate of diffusion. At the optimum temperature and pressure, maximum diffusion takes place. Okay, the size of the diffusing particle. So if they are smaller the size, faster the diffusion. If the size of the diffusing particle, if they are smaller in size, they have the faster diffusion. So smaller the size of the substances, greater the diffusion. So solubility in lipids of the membrane. So that is also important because plasma membrane, you know that they are made up of phospholipids. So solubility in the lipids of membrane, they also play an important role. Okay, because they have this phospholipid layer, biphospholipid layer. If they are more soluble in lipids, so they are much more diffusion can take place. Substances soluble in lipids diffuse faster through the membrane. Okay, the diffusion rate would be faster if they are having a uh, higher solubility in lipids. So the facilitated diffusion. It is the diffusion of hydrophilic substances with the help of membrane protein channels. So it is nothing but facilitated diffusion is also a diffusion process, but it is diffusion of hydrophilic, that is water loving substances with the help of membrane protein channels and without the expenditure of ATP energy. So the diffusion of hydrophilic substances with the help of protein channels. See, they are being facilitated by the protein channel, and there is no expenditure of energy whenever they are transported. So that is what we call it as facilitated diffusion. So facilitated by the protein channels, the diffusion of hydrophilic substances with the help of proteins on the membrane. So you know that the fluid mosaic model of plasma membrane, they have some of the proteins are integrated proteins, some of them are the surface proteins. So the protein channels, they are going to help in the diffusion of hydrophilic substances. So, and there is no expenditure of ATP energy. So this we call it as facilitated diffusion. So facilitated diffusion is always with the concentration gradient. So it needs a concentration gradient. So the facilitated diffusion is with the concentration gradient. So it requires a concentration gradient. Okay. So facilitated diffusion is very specific. So they are very specific. So what type of substances should enter? They are very specific on that. Selects substances for uptake. It is sensitive to inhibitors. So the transport proteins are sensitive to inhibitors. So if the inhibitors enter, they react with the protein side chain and prevent the diffusion. So the transport proteins are sensitive to inhibitors. What are inhibitors? They are the substances which prevent uh, they are the substances which prevent the diffusion from taking place, facilitated diffusion by taking place. What the inhibitor does is it binds to the protein side chains and prevents uh, uh, the facilitated diffusion by taking place. So that is one thing that you have to remember. So it is with the concentration gradient. Facilitated diffusion also does not require any ATP. There is no expenditure of energy. Okay. The transport rate, they are going to reach a maximum when all the protein transporters which are present in the fluid, the plasma membrane or cell membrane, when all the protein transport are involved, so the transport rate will be maximum when all the protein transport channels in the cell membranes, they are all involved in transporting this substances or in facilitated diffusion, then the transport rate reaches the maximum. That is, the saturation point is reached when all the protein channels or the protein transporters in this membrane, they are involved in the facilitated diffusion. So it reaches a maximum. The rate of facilitated diffusion will be maximum. So it reaches a saturation point. Beyond that, they cannot undergo any more facilitated diffusion. So that is what the sentence states. Transport rate or the facilitated diffusion rate reaches a maximum when all the protein transporters are being when all the protein transporters on the cell membrane are being used. So they undergo saturation. So, and here in the facilitated diffusion, you have to understand some of the protein channels are always opens, and in others they are regulated or controlled. That is, they open and close. So you have opening and closing mechanism, but some of the protein channels are always open. The others can be controlled. So the some of the protein channels are large sized. Example, porins are there, which are large size. So porins form huge pores in the outer membrane of plastids, so mitochondria and some bacteria. So the molecules having size of small proteins can pass through them. So some of the protein channels are always open, the others are controlled. Some are large sized. So we call them as proteins. So protein channels which are always open and are large sized, we call them as porins. So porins are going to form huge pores through which small protein molecules can pass through. Okay, so porins are forming huge pores in the outer membranes of plastids. So plastids, if you take it, it can be the chloroplast membrane, or it can be the mitochondria membrane, outermost membrane of them. They have these porins which form huge pores in the membranes of plastids like chloroplast or mitochondria, and some bacteria you find this porins. So molecules having size of small proteins can pass through them. So this porin, they can pass through them. So an extracellular molecule, how is this movement of this extracellular molecule or substance to be diffused? How is it moving? An extracellular molecule, see these are the extracellular molecule. It binds to the transport protein. It is binding to the transport protein, and the transport protein rotates it. Then it rotates and releases the, see the point of entry is in this manner, in this direction. Then it is rotating and releasing them inside the cell. So that is what the protein channel is doing whenever an extracellular molecule binds to the transport protein. It is going to rotate them and then release the molecule inside the cell. Here the extracellular molecule is water. So example, water channels made up of 8 types of aquaporins. So the water channels is an example for this movement of intracellular molecule, that is water, which binds to the protein channel. Then they are rotated and released inside the cell. Okay, so example is water channels. There are which are made up of 8 types of aquaporins. So the water channels are of 8 types. They are made up of 8 types of aquaporins. So facilitated diffusion based on the type of entry of molecule, the number of entry of molecules. So the facilitated diffusion is of different type. And you already know that the facilitated diffusion, it can be passive uniport, passive symport, and passive antiport. So the facilitated diffusion, the entry of molecule, if a single molecule, a molecule alone is nothing but a single molecule, moves across the plasma membrane through transport or carrier protein. So if a single molecule moves along a plasma membrane through a transport or carrier molecule, we call it as uniport. So in uniport, it is in a single direction and a single molecule. A single molecule moves across the protein membrane through the carrier protein or transport protein. We call it as uniport. In antiport, you notice that there are two molecules which are moving in opposite direction. So in uniport, two molecules are moving across a membrane in opposite directions. So we call it as antiport. So two molecules, if they are moving in opposite directions through a transport or carrier protein on the plasma membrane, we call it as antiport. So antiport, there is an entry of molecule, that is influx, and there is an exit of molecule, that is efflux. Influx and efflux takes place. So especially I remember the potassium ion, uh, the carrier ion theory or potassium ion pump theory. So wherein there is entry of potassium ion, another molecule exits. So wherever there is exits of potassium ion, the other molecule enters in. So that is antiport movement. I remember the potassium ion pump theory. So in antiport, two molecules are moving in the opposite directions. So there is one of them is entering, the other is exiting. So two molecules move in the opposite directions through the carrier protein or transport protein. So we call it as antiport. In symport, two molecules move together in the same direction. Two molecules which are moving together in the same direction through the transport protein or carrier protein in the plasma membrane, we call it as symport. If two molecules are moving together in the same direction across the membrane through the carrier protein or transport protein, so we call it as symport movement. So these are the 3 types that you have to remember. Uniport, so facilitated diffusion, the movement of molecules can be of uniport type, symport type, or antipode. The third type of means of transport that we are going to discuss is active transport. So it is the transport of molecules against the concentration gradient. So that is from lower concentrated region to the higher concentrated region. So the transport of molecules against the concentrated gradient, that is from lower concentrated region to the higher concentrated region, with the expenditure of energy. And this is brought about by a protein channel. With the expenditure of energy, it is carried out. It is also carried out by membrane proteins. The pumps are proteins that use energy to transport substances across cell membrane. The pumps are proteins. It utilizes the energy to transport substances across cell membrane. And this sort of transport, we call it as uphill transport. Okay, the pumps are the proteins which use the proteins on the membranes. They use energy to transport substances across the cell membrane against the concentration gradient. So we call this transport as uphill transport. So again, the transport rate reaches a maximum when all the protein transporters in the membrane, that is the plasma membrane, they are being used. So they undergo the saturation point. So the transport rate of active transport will reach maximum when all the protein transport are being used on the plasma membrane. So they reach this saturation point. The carrier protein is very specific. You know that even here, the protein channel, the transport protein or carrier protein is very specific. So these are sensitive to inhibitors, the carrier proteins. Whenever the inhibitors are present, they bind to the protein side chains and inhibit or prevent the active transport. So even the protein carrier proteins are very much sensitive to inhibitors. So now let us understand the summary of all these three types of it. So, and we are comparing them, comparison of different transport processes. So require membrane proteins, simple diffusion does not require, whereas facilitated and active transport, they require membrane protein. Simple diffusion is highly selective. No, they are not selective, but facilitated transport and active transport, they are selective of what particles enter in. They are highly selective. But in diffusion, they are not selective. They transport saturates. Simple diffusion does not transport saturates, whereas facilitated transport and active transport, they undergo the saturates. So they transport saturates when all the protein channels on the membranes are transporting. So we call it as transporting. They reach the saturates. So facilitated transport, they transport the saturates. Active transport, yes. Uphill transport, that is against the concentration gradient. In simple diffusion and facilitated diffusion, you don't find there is, they flow with the concentration gradient. So uphill transport is absent. No, no. Whereas in case of active transport, since they are flowing against the concentration gradient, there is a transport of molecules against the concentration gradient. So we call it as uphill transport. Yes, active transport, only active transport has uphill transport. The requires ATP energy, only the active transport requires ATP energy. So whereas the simple diffusion and facilitated diffusion, they do not require the ATP energy. They are passive process. Okay. Next, we'll try to understand the plant-water relations. Okay, so water, minerals, they play an important role in the growth of the plant. That is their uh, important aspect of it. See, water is the elixir of life. So without water, life cannot exist. So water, the solar energy, they all play an important role. So for the raw materials itself for photosynthesis is water, carbon dioxide, and in presence of sunlight, they absorb the sunlight and utilize that energy to fuse this carbon dioxide and water. And that is how we obtain glucose. And there is a liberation of oxygen during photosynthesis. So this entire process is taking place and water is an important component of it. Okay, so water and the light energy, they are playing an important role in for the producers to grow and develop. Okay, so the plant water relations will be talking about in the continuity of this topic. So what is water? Water is a universal solvent. Almost all the substances, they dissolve in water. See, even in your chemistry labs, whenever you are having this acid base reactions and other things, solubility test, you do that first. You'll be doing it in water, the normal water, that is normal temperature, the water what is there. Then if the substance doesn't dissolve, the salt doesn't dissolve, you heat the water. Even after that, if the salt doesn't dissolve, then you go for other solubility tests like dilute HCl, dilute H2SO4. So you go into that. So, but water is a universal solvent. Most of the components, they dissolve in water. So the protoplasm is the physical basis of life. Okay, that protoplasm itself is made up of water, in which various molecules are either they are dissolved completely in this protoplasm, the water in the protoplasm, or those molecules are suspended in the water part of protoplasm. So protoplasm is mainly water in which various molecules are either dissolved or suspended. Okay, the soft plant parts mostly contain water. Example, watermelon has nearly 92% water. So it is a blessing in the summer season, isn't it? So the soft plant parts, they contain maximum water. Even cucumber. Okay. So watermelon has nearly 92% of water. The herbaceous plants have only 10 to 15% dry matter. Remaining are all, that is nearly 85 to 90% of herbaceous plants are made up of water. Herbaceous plants, you can remember coriander. Okay, so the dry seeds and woody parts, so you might think that they are deficient of water, but that is not so. Even they contain a little amount of water. The dry seeds and even the woody part, dry wood or log of wood, even they contain a little amount of water. A mature corn plant, so the corn maize plant, they can absorb 3 liters of water daily. That is their capability. So a mature corn plant or maize plant, they can absorb 3 liters of water every day. A mustard plant, it absorbs water equal to its body weight within 5 hours. Mustard is sasve ಗಿಡ. So our sarson ka tel, that sarson. So mustard plant absorbs water equal to its own weight in about 5 hours. So that is, if it is, just assume it is 15 gram in weight. So it absorbs 15 gram of water within 5 hours. I'm just giving you a example. So next we'll go for is understanding water potential. See, water potential is denoted by the symbol psi W. So psi W implies it is water potential. So it is the potential energy of water. Water potential can also be described as it is the potential energy of water. So I had already told you the energies can be either in the form, if it is in motion, we call it as kinetic energy. If it is in rest, we call it as potential energy. So water potential is, it is the potential energy of water. So it can also be defined as, water potential can also be defined as the measure of ability of water molecules to move freely in solution. So it is a measure of water potential is, it is a measure of the ability of water to move freely in solution. The ability of water molecules to move freely in solution, we call it as water potential. It is a measure. We are measuring the ability of water molecules to move within a solution, to move freely in solution. So they are denoted by the unit. So it is expressed in pressure units such as pascals. So the water potential is expressed in pressure units such as pascals or PA. So the water molecules also have kinetic energies and in motion. So kinetic energy is more in liquid and gaseous form, as they show random, rapid and constant motion of water molecules. So the water molecules have kinetic energy. In liquid and gaseous form, water shows random, rapid, and constant motion. So the kinetic energy is more in liquid and gaseous form because they show random, rapid, and constant motion. So as the concentration of water in a system increases, the more the amount of water in a system, the kinetic energy also increases. Hence, pure water will have the greatest water potential. So as the concentration of water increases in a system, so the kinetic energy also, its kinetic energy, that is water potential also increases. Hence, pure water will have the greatest water potential. I told you the greatest water potential value is 0. So water potential values are always in negative. The highest water potential that they can have is 0, and pure water has that. And you should also remember the water molecules move from higher energy system, that is higher water potential, to lower water potential. Such movement of substances down a gradient of free energy is called as diffusion. So there is this water potential is also a type of diffusion that is happening in a system. So the water potential is also diffusion is also a type of system. The water molecules move from higher energy system, that is higher water potential, to lower energy system, that is lower water potential. So such movement of substances down a concentration gradient from higher to lower, so it is called as diffusion. So water potential of pure water at standard temperatures and standard pressure is 0. So the pure water potential of pure water at standard temperatures uh, and standard pressure, it is going to be 0. So if a solute is dissolved in pure water, the concentration of water decreases. So the free energy of water decreases. So the concentration of water decreases and the free energy also decreases, reducing its water potential. So if a solute is dissolved in pure water, so the concentration of free energy of water decreases, reducing its water potential. The solution has lower water potential. Hence, water potential of solution is lower than the pure water. So the water potential of solutions are always lower than pure water. That is, they are all negative values because pure water value is 0. Okay. The magnitude of lowering of water potential due to dissolution of a solute is called solute potential or osmotic potential. The magnitude, the amount of magnitude is the magnitude of lowering of water potential due to addition of solute. So due to dissolution of solute is called as solute potential or osmotic potential. So it is denoted by the symbol psi s. Psi s is always negative. The more the solute molecules, the more the lower is the solute potential. The more the solute molecules, the lower is the solute potential. So you should remember that if you are going to add what is solute potential, the magnitude of lowering of water potential due to dissolution of a solute, we call it as solute potential or osmotic potential. More the solute in a solution, lower this, more negative is the value of solute potential. So lower the value of solute potential. So you always remember this concept. So if you have solute potential is very low and solute potential is high, so you should understand the solute concentration. If it is more, the solute potential is lower. So that is, they are more negative in value. For a solution at atmospheric pressure, a solution, the water potential equals solute potential if it is at atmospheric pressure. At atmospheric pressure, water potential is always equal to solute potential. So you might get such questions from the NEET or CET. At atmospheric pressure, Water potential equals solute potential plus pressure potential. Water potential equals solute potential. Water potential equals solute potential plus osmotic potential. So the right answer is water potential equals solute potential at atmospheric pressure. The next part is if a pressure greater than atmospheric pressure is applied to pure water. If you are applying a pressure greater than atmospheric pressure to a pure water or a solution, its water potential increases. So if you apply a pressure greater than the atmospheric pressure to pure water or a solution, its water potential increases. So when you apply greater the atmospheric pressure, higher the water potential increases. So it is equivalent to pumping water from one place to another. So when water enters a plant cell due to diffusion, so it causes a pressure against the cell wall. When water enters a plant cell due to diffusion, it causes a pressure against the cell wall. It makes the cell turgid. So this increases the uh, pressure potential. So turgor pressure, the pressure applied by water due to entry of water into the cell onto the cell wall, we call it as turgor pressure. So the cell wall, in order to neutralize this turgor pressure, they have an equal and opposite pressure, which we call it as wall pressure. Okay, so but that concept is not discussed here. So just remember about it. So when water enters a plant cell due to diffusion, it causes a pressure against the cell wall because of the swelling up of the cell. Okay, it makes the cell turgid. The cell bloats up, we call it as turgid. So they exhibit a pressure on the cell wall, and we call that as turgor pressure. Turgor pressure is due to the turgidity of the cell. The pressure is exerted on the cell wall. Now the wall is going to have a pressure which is equal and opposite to the turgor pressure, and we call that as wall pressure. Okay, so the turgor pressure, when it is going to when the pressure is applied on the cell wall because of turgidity, we call it as this increases the pressure potential. So that increases the water potential. Okay, pressure potential is usually positive in values, and you should also understand, though negative potential or tension in the water column in the xylem plays a major role in water transport upstream. So pressure potential is usually positive values, though negative potential or tension. So in case of water absorption in through the xylem, there is a negative potential, negative hydrostatic pressure or negative potential or tension in the water column because of transpiration. It happens in the xylem. So the negative pressure potential plays an important role in the uptake of water in stem. Okay, water transport upper stem is possible because of the negative potential or tension in the water column. Okay, water potential of the xylem. Okay, water potential of a cell is affected by water potential of a cell. It is affected by solute potential and pressure potential. Positive value, more the pressure, higher the water potential. Lower the pressure, lower the water potential. So they are directly directly proportional. Okay, so we call them as positive values. Solute potential is more the solute potential, lower the water potential. Lower the solute potential, higher the water potential. So higher the value of uh, so that is why solute potential is negative. So we have this, isn't it? The more the solute molecules, the lower is the solute potential. Okay, the lower the solute potential, the lower the uh, higher the water potential. Okay, more the solute molecules, lower is the solute potential. So the relationship between the solute and water potential is psi W equals psi S plus psi P. So the water potential is a sum of, you can also define water potential as the sum of solute and pressure potential. Then we discussed the concept of osmosis. Okay, osmosis is the spontaneous diffusion of water across a differentially or semi-permeable membrane. Differentially is nothing but semi-permeable, another word for it. So the spontaneous diffusion, okay, of water across a differentially or semi-permeable membrane. See, osmosis is also a passive process. There is no expenditure of energy. Osmosis can also take place in non-living component. It is not that it is taking place only in living component. So osmosis is the spontaneous diffusion of water across a differentially or semi-permeable membrane. So now the cell membrane, plasma membrane and tonoplast, they play a very important role. In plant cell, you know that the vacuole is occupies this central vacuole is very large, and the vacuole is covered by an outermost membrane called as tonoplast. In plant cell, especially, the vacuole is very large and it occupies a huge space of the plant cell, and they are covered by a membrane called as tonoplast. So the cell membrane, that is plasma membrane and tonoplast, so which is the membrane of the vacuole, we call it as tonoplast. They are the important determinants of the movement of molecules in and out of the cell. What molecules has to enter and what molecules has to exit is decided by this important determinants, which are nothing but tonoplast and cell membrane. They decide what molecules has to enter and exit out of the cell. But cell wall is not a barrier. You know that cell wall is not a barrier because it is a non-living component of the cell, and it is permeable to water and solution. So water and substances dissolved in a solution, they are permeable to. Okay, whereas cell membrane is semi-permeable, you know about that. So selectively they allow the substances to enter through them. So there was a very good question from one of the student: what is semi-permeable and selectively permeable? Especially selectively permeable, when we are talking about the protein transport channel, they are doing it. When I'm talking about semi-permeable membrane, where it is just the cell membrane itself is semi-permeable with or without protein channel. Okay, so that is what it implies. When we are saying selectively it allows, it is by this protein pumps or transport proteins. Okay, just remember that is the hairline difference between selectively permeable and semi-permeable membrane. So they are semi-permeable, they allow only a few elements to enter through them. So whereas selectively permeable is decided by the carrier protein or transport proteins on the membranes. So in a plant cell, the cell membrane and the tonoplast, they are going to determine, they are the determinants as to what molecules has to enter or exit out is determined by this cell membrane and tonoplast. So cell wall is not a barrier to movement as it is permeable to water and substances dissolved in solution. So vacuolar sap, so this sap within the vacuole is a large central vacuole. In the large central vacuole, this vacuolar sap, so they contribute to the solute potential of the cell. So for 1 mark, you should be thorough and understand about it. So the solute potential of the cell is decided by the vacuolar sap, which is present in the large central vacuole. So the solute potential of the cell is determined by the large central vacuole. Okay, the vacuoles are present in the large central vacuole. Now, osmosis here, there are two chambers. In one of the chambers, they have the solution A and solution B. So, solution A is having higher water potential. That is, it is having more amount of water and lesser amount of solute and high solute potential. So they are having higher water potential and high solute potential. So in the solution B, which has more solute, more the solute, lower the solute potential. We discussed that statement. Okay, solution B, they have lower water potential and lower solute potential. So what is the direction in which the water flows? And they are separated by a semi-permeable membrane. So the water flows from the solution A to solution B. Okay, so water always moves from the higher water potential and higher solute potential to the lower water potential or the lower solute potential through a semi-permeable membrane. So more the amount of solutes, lower is its solute potential. Okay. So the net direction and rate of osmosis depends on pressure gradient and concentration gradient. The more the concentration gradient, the faster is the rate of osmosis. So the net direction and rate of osmosis depends on pressure gradient and concentration gradient. So these two determines the net direction and rate of osmosis, in which direction osmosis should take place and what should be the speed of osmosis. It is determined by these two components, pressure gradient and concentration gradient. So water moves from its higher chemical potential, region of higher chemical potential or concentration, to its region of lower chemical potential until equilibrium is reached. So water moves from its higher region of higher chemical potential, that is water potential, higher water potential and higher solute potential, to a region of lower water potential or lower solute potential until equilibrium is attained through a semi-permeable membrane. So this we call it as osmosis. At equilibrium, both the chambers should have the same water potential. There is neither entry nor exit of water at equilibrium. At equilibrium, both the chambers should have the same water potential. Now the demonstration of the osmosis, you can notice it. So the first one is potato osmometer, which is shown in a living component of cell. So we also call it as physiological experiment to demonstrate osmosis. So if they ask you, describe the physiological experiment to demonstrate osmosis, remember that they are asking you to write about potato osmometer. If they are asking you to describe the physical setup to demonstrate osmosis, so that is nothing but the inverted Thistle funnel experiment. Thistle funnel experiment. Okay, so potato osmometer, you can also call it as physiological experiment to demonstrate osmosis. So what we are doing in this potato osmometer is we take a fresh potato, peel off its skin, and scoop the some of the pulp of this or scoop the pulp of this potato and form a cup shaped structure. Okay, so then we are filling this cup shaped structure with uh, the sugar solution, concentrated sugar solution, and we mark the initial level with a dot pin or gun pin, what you call it as the dot pin. We mark it up and we place it in a petri plate containing water or in a beaker containing water. So after a few hours or after 1 or 2 hours, you can notice that there is an increase in the level of water. So the final level of water that you have noticed, so you place another uh, the dot pin there. So that is what you notice before osmosis and after osmosis. So you notice that there has been entry of water from the beaker into this cup shaped structure having the cup potato cup containing the concentrated sugar solution. So end osmosis has taken place, entry of water has taken place, and the semi-permeable membrane are the plasma membranes of the cells of these um, potato. Okay, so that is the semi-permeable membrane. So it is in a living cell we are showing the demonstrating the osmosis. So make a cavity in a potato tuber. In this, pour concentrated sugar solution. This complete setup we call it as, and place this potato in a beaker containing water. So this complete setup is called as potato osmometer. Place it in water. As a result, water enters the cavity due to osmosis. So the demonstration of osmosis for this Thistle funnel is filled with sucrose solution and it is kept inverted in a beaker containing pure water. Thistle funnel which is filled with sucrose solution, that is sugar solution. What is sugar? Cane sugar. So sucrose solution is kept inverted in a beaker containing pure water. So the mouth of this thistle funnel is covered by a semi-permeable membrane that is obtained from eggshell membrane. How do we obtain this eggshell membrane? A small hole is made in the egg and all the contents of the egg are removed. And then this shell with this eggshell membrane, they are kept in dilute HCl. When the calcium part of the eggshell they dissolve and we get the shell membrane. That is how we are going to obtain the eggshell membrane. So the sucrose solution is separated from water by the semi-permeable membrane, that is the eggshell membrane, which is covered at the mouth of the thistle funnel. So water moves into the funnel as a result of osmosis. The level of the solution in the funnel raises. The level of the solution in the funnel raises. So it continues till equilibrium is reached. So now in this thistle funnel experiment itself, if we apply external pressure is applied, if an external pressure is applied from the upper part of the funnel, no water diffuses into the funnel through the membrane. If you are going to apply an external pressure is applied from the upper part of the funnel, the water does not diffuse into the funnel through the semi-permeable membrane. There is no osmosis taking place and there is no flow of water. So the pressure required to prevent water diffusion is the osmotic pressure. The pressure required to prevent the water flow, we call it as osmotic pressure. So the pressure required to prevent water flow by diffusion, we call it as osmotic pressure. So this is the function of solute concentration. Okay, more the solute concentration, greater will be the pressure required to prevent water diffusion. This they have asked in many of the multiple choice questions. So the solute concentration is higher in a thistle funnel. So what will be the pressure required to prevent water diffusion? Greater or lesser? So more the solute concentration, more the pressure required to prevent the water diffusion. Lesser the solute concentration, lesser the pressure required to prevent the water diffusion. So numerically, osmotic pressure is equivalent to osmotic potential. Numerically, they are equal. Osmotic pressure is equal to osmotic potential. What is osmotic potential? This solute dissolved, so the magnitude of solute dissolved in a water, we call it as the solute potential or osmotic potential. So numerically, osmotic pressure and osmotic potential are equivalent, but the signs are different. Osmotic pressure is positive, osmotic potential or solute potential is negative. So please remember these values. So osmotic pressure is positive, osmotic potential is negative, even though these values are the same. The next is plasmolysis. Plasmolysis is due to exosmosis. Whenever a cell is placed in a hypertonic solution, they lose water. The cell loses water to the external medium, and as a result of it, there is a shrinkage of the plasma membrane and protoplasm from the cell wall. So we call that as plasmolysis. So if an external solution balances the osmotic pressure of cytoplasm, so the pressure required to prevent the water flow, if an external solution balances the osmotic pressure of cytoplasm, so then that external solution is called as isotonic. That is, they are having the same concentration as that of the cell sap. Okay, so if an external solution balances the osmotic pressure of cytoplasm, it is called isotonic. When a cell or tissue is placed in a isotonic solution, there is no net flow of water, either inside or outside. There is neither exit or entry of water whenever a cell is placed in a isotonic solution. When can you say that the external solution is isotonic? When their osmotic pressure of cytoplasm, it is equal to the external solution balances the osmotic pressure of cytoplasm, then the external solution is called as isotonic. Okay, so when a cell is placed in a isotonic solution, there is neither flow of water nor there is no net flow of water, either entry or exit. So water flow is in equilibrium in an isotonic solution. So the cells are said to be flaccid. So whenever there is neither entry nor exit of water, we call the cells to be flaccid. If the external solution is more dilute than the that is more dilute in the sense they have higher water potential, higher solute potential than the cytoplasm, it is hypotonic. So the solution is hypotonic. If a external solution is more dilute, has greater water potential than the cytoplasm, it is hypotonic. So end osmosis takes place in a hypotonic solution. The cells swell ಕೂತ್ಕೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತೆ. The cells are going to bloat up. So we call it as turgid cell. Turgor pressure, you know that the protoplasm exerts the pressure on the cell wall. We call it as Turgor pressure. So the cell swells in a hypotonic solution. So the cell is turgid. If external solution is more concentrated, okay, that is they have more solutes than cytoplasm. So they have a lower water potential and lower solute potential. So if an external solution is more concentrated than cytoplasm, it is hypertonic. So we call that as hypertonic uh, solution. In hypertonic solution, the cell loses water, it undergoes exosmosis. As a result, the cell becomes plasmolized. When a cell is placed in a hypertonic solution, water moves from the cell, that is area of higher water potential, to the area of lower water potential, that is the hypertonic solution. Water moves from the cell across the membrane to outside. So as a result of it, the cell shrinks. It is called as plasmolysis. Water is first lost from the cytoplasm and then from the vacuole. So that is step by step loss of water. In plasmolysis, water is first lost from the cytoplasm, then they lose water from the vacuole also. During plasmolysis, the cell membrane, that is the plasma membrane and protoplast of plant, they shrink away from its cell wall. Such cells are said to be plasmolized. If the protoplasm and the plasma membrane of the cell shrinks away from the cell wall whenever they are placed in hypertonic solution, such cell is said to be plasmolized cell. This is a plasmolized cell. Flaccid, you can notice it in isotonic solution. Turgid, you can notice it in hypotonic solution. The cell is plasmolized in case of hypertonic solution. So you have done this. This is the experiment that you'll be doing in your practicals. You take a Rio leaf where the cells are all colored. They are violet colored, or purple colored. So one side of it, the leaf will be green color. Another side of the leaf will be purple colored. You take this epidermal peel of this Rio leaf and you place it in a concentrated solution. After 10 or 15 minutes, you observe this epidermal peel under microscope. You can notice that the cytoplasm, which was completely here along with the vacuole, they have got shrunk. So the cytoplasm has shrunk, the protoplasm has shrunk with the plasma membrane, and you can notice the shrinking of it from the cell wall, the protoplasm and the plasma membrane. So this is a plasmolized cell, which you notice in case of this Rio leaf. Okay, so that experiment you'll be doing it in the lab. So where you notice where you have to demonstrate this plasmolysis. Okay, so these are all pictures seen through microscope. Plasmolysis is a reversible process. When the plasmolized cells are placed in hypotonic solution, water diffuses into the cell. As a result, the cytoplasm builds up a pressure against the wall. So they become turgid. As a result, the cytoplasm builds up a pressure against the wall. It is called Turgor pressure. An equal and opposite pressure is exerted by the cell wall, which we call it as wall pressure. The pressure exerted by the protoplast due to the entry of water against the rigid cell walls is called pressure potential. So you can also define pressure potential as the pressure exerted by the protoplasm due to the entry of water against the rigid walls. So that pressure, that Targar pressure, you can also call it as the pressure potential. The cells do not rupture even though their cells become turgid, even though there is endosmosis, the cells do not rupture due to the rigidity of cell wall. Whereas RBCs, membranes, if they are placed in a hypotonic solution, animal cells, they do not have cell wall. So they are going to rupture. They are going to break or rupture. RBCs ruptures, but not a plant cell, because plant cells have cell membranes and the cell membranes are rigid. So as a result of it, they can withstand this Targar pressure or pressure potential because they exhibit an equal and opposite pressure on them, that is the wall pressure. The cell does not rupture due to the rigidity of cell wall. Targar pressure causes enlargement and extension growth of cells. Both takes place. So Targar pressure, they cause the enlargement and extension growth of cells. That is taking place here. So the next part that we have to study is imbibition. Imbibition is a type of diffusion in which water is absorbed by solids, hydrophilic colloids, increasing their volume. So adsorption of water by seeds and dry wood is an example of uh, this particular imbibition. Imbibition is the process of adsorption of water by hydrophilic colloidal substances followed by absorption of water. So there is capillarity and the diffusion also takes place in case of imbibition. So it is a type of diffusion in which water is absorbed by the solids, that is colloids, increasing their volume. Example, absorption of water by seeds and dry woods. Here they have taken this methi seeds, menthia, okay, and you can see maximum imbibition after you have soaked them in water. You can notice the imbibed seeds which are larger in size. So the pressure due to the swelling of wood can split rocks. So the pressure, so absorption of water by seeds and dry wood. I have already told you how in the olden days the huge boulders were broken using this imbibition mechanism. They used to make a pit in the boulder, and that used to be stuffed with a dry log of wood, and they used to continuously water this dry log of wood. When they underwent imbibition, they used to swell, and that is how they used to uh, crack up the boulders. So in absence of all these trinitrotoluene, TNT or dynamites, they were using this mechanism of imbibition to break the boulders or crack the boulders. Okay, so seedlings are emerged out of the soil due to the imbibition pressure. So the seedlings which are coming out of the soil, they are due to the imbibition pressure. So now what are the necessary parameters for imbibition to occur? Imbibition requires difference in concentration gradient. So the water potential gradient between the absorbent and the liquid imbibed should be there. So there should be a difference in water potential between the absorbent and the liquid imbibed. So that water potential gradient should also be there. Affinity between adsorbent and liquid. So that is also an important aspect of for imbibition to occur. There should be an affinity between adsorbent and liquid. So these are factors that you have to remember about it. So the long distance transport of water, I'll be discussing the summary in tomorrow's class. Okay. You have any doubts or clarifications in the present topic, please let me know.